Welcome back to the Curious Drown podcast. My name is Cindy, and today I am joined by Tatiana. Hi, Tatiana.
Hello, Cindy.
I wish we would have recorded our intro of like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was really exciting when I saw your face.
I know. So we go back. I don't know. I don't want to say the years. I don't want to count right now.
You don't want to age us, you mean?
Well, everybody knows I turned 40, so that's where we are. But yes, we did our masters together. You were in the physiotherapy part of it, right? And I was in the rehab, the science, the research part of it.
Yeah.
But we go back to our masters, and it's been so long. And like I was telling her, I was scrolling through LinkedIn and saw a post about this person, Rachel, one of your clients, and it really marked me. And I reached out to you within like 3.5 seconds of reading that post because I knew that the audience here at Curious Neuron would resonate with what you were talking about and what your client had experienced. And then when I dove into your work, I was like, wow, we just really need to learn more about this. I've spoken about mindfulness and I've spoken about all of that from kind of like the brain standpoint, but we never kind of join it to the body and like how it impacts us and overall. So that's the chat we're going to have today. Before we do begin, I just want everybody to get to know you a little bit more. If they go into your LinkedIn, they'll see mindfulness movement health coach. What is that and what kind of stuff do you do with people?
Going back, originally, my first passion is the human body, which brought me to go to my master's in physiotherapy school, which is how I met Cindy. We were working in the stroke rehab lab together back in the day. And over my years as a practitioner, I really got to learn my body, and going through pregnancy and my changes, I fell in love with yoga and then really dove into the mindfulness side and the philosophy of yoga practice. For those of you listening who don't know a ton, it's not a religion. It's really about getting in touch with your emotions, your values, your true spirit. And I think some people shy away from the word yoga sometimes, so I call it mindful movement, but really they're hand in hand.
Right.
And, as a graduate from physiotherapy school, but physiotherapy is also changing now. But before, like, let's say 10 years ago, there was sort of this gap between physical pain and physical treatment versus mental health and mental health treatments. And I kind of, over my time with clients, especially dealing with like busy moms, busy parents, we needed to bridge that gap. So sort of my new niche is helping people, particularly women 40 plus, now that we're, maybe have a bit more time because the kids aren't physically needing us as much, but having that time to reconnect with our bodies, not just our physical bodies, but our mental, emotional, and the physical, sort of blending them together.
It's such an important thing to realize that we do need to do that, right? Because I think you're right. Like now my kids are 4, 6, and 8, and I'm starting to see that there is a bit more time for me to do certain things a little bit more than before. Obviously everybody who knows my schedule, it's a little different, but I still try to find time to do a little something, maybe not every day. And that's okay. Like I do what I can, understanding the connection between that mind and that body, like I think it's so important for us to realize that we can do some work on our minds and work. I've spoken about self-compassion as well, and how that impacts, how kind we are to ourselves. And it's just the whole everything connected. So going back to this client that you had, Rachel, you spoke about just kind of being on the go all the time, right? And never really having time to stop, and her kind of noticing like you seem calm and zen and like, well, how do I get to that? Like and I think as parents and as moms, we have so much to balance, and we're trying to like figure out how to do it all, and dads too, but I hear this from moms, and it's like nonstop. And then we feel these aches and pains, and we feel off, headaches and just not feeling well, and I've had moments like that, but we don't realize that there's a mindful aspect to it. So can you describe that person? Do you remember that client, Rachel?
Yeah. So it's Rochelle, but
sorry, Rochelle.
That's okay. She's very open, and obviously she gave you permission to post her picture, so I can give you a little bit about her. She's actually a very successful L'Oreal hairstylist artist. She's like very good at color and cut, and anyway, professional woman. She always goes 120% at everything she does. She has 3 kids as well. whether it comes to working out, working, things with her kids, like she's always just 120.
Right.
And at some point, your body can't handle that. Your brain can't handle that. And she's finally like realized that because, she sees me because she has old traumas or old surgeries, aches and pains, but because she's so go, go, go and trying to do everything like the best she can, including like, okay, I'm going to like run, X amount every day or like go to the gym X amount or work this, work that. There wasn't that like slow down component, right? It's like yin and yang.
Right.
Like everything in life, we need balance. And it was hard for her to get there. And it was just it wasn't even like we were purposefully talking about it. She was just on my physiotherapy table and I was just checking her breath. I was just checking her rib cage movement. Because when we breathe, we try to have this like belly, rib cage, chest. And then when you exhale, chest, rib cage, belly soften. So I was just trying to see if she had that kind of rhythm to help her calm before I did some manual therapy or whatever it was I was doing. And she started laughing. And then that's when she said to me, you're so zen. And I'm like a tornado. And like I never would have described myself like that in my 30s. I was a tornado and I recognize that now, but it's like I didn't even think of that. It's like when someone observes you or you like remove yourself, and this is part of mindfulness practice. And Cindy, you can speak to this too. Like it's being able to like remove, it's almost like you're looking at yourself as a third person without judgment and just to be like, where am I at? Right. And then you can be like, okay, like I am feeling spirally right now, or I'm level and calm, or like it's just like being able to kind of remove yourself. It sounds so strange because like we are ourselves, but the mind is pretty cool. We can do that, but it takes practice. And that's the hard part, right? Like it's not overnight. It needs to be consistent, but it doesn't have to be crazy. Like I always say to my clients, like you don't need like to meditate for half an hour.
Right.
If you
Exactly.
just, like take 5 calm breaths with your eyes closed, like you can reset. Or you drink your coffee and notice all the senses, right? Like the smell, the feel of the mug in your hands. Put your phone away during this. Like little moments in everyday life, if you can just be in that moment, that's a
Right.
practice.
Yes. So you just said a bunch of things now. I have to try to think of which one I want to start with. You
Okay,
mentioned,
sorry.
no, because it was so good. You mentioned like it takes practice. And I think I would bring in the word awareness as well. I think we're so used to just powering through our days that we don't realize, oh,
Yeah.
I wasn't feeling certain. I was feeling a certain way at that point, but I didn't even acknowledge it. I just kind of powered through that feeling at work of like, that feeling, I don't know, let's just say of disappointment when my boss told me something and I went through the next moment. And then I picked up my
Yes.
kids from school or daycare and they had a meltdown in the car. And now I'm piling up that feeling of like anxiety or
Yes.
overwhelm. And then I'm going home and now I'm home and I'm cooking and my kid is
Oh,
whining and now I'm feeling frustrated. Right. So it's like we're just
yeah.
throwing in a bunch of things into that like bucket. And I call them like micro emotions. It's not a scientific term.
Yeah.
I just came up with that.
I
But
love
like,
that word though.
right?
It's so
These
true.
tiny moments that we don't acknowledge, we don't label, we don't bring awareness to it. And then we blow up on our child, or we get mad because we're missing an egg, for to bake something or cook, and we yell at the fridge or we start crying and we're like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
But it's because everything piled up. So I love what you were saying, because if we can train ourselves, like you said, to stop and pause, it's not about the 5, 10, 15 minutes of meditation. You don't even have to start with that, but just
No.
be aware and start being conscious of
Yeah.
that moment and how you
Yes.
feel. And
Yeah.
that falls within emotional intelligence, where you're just labeling. And that kind of calms and regulates the system just by labeling and saying where you're at right now. So what you said, honestly,
Yeah.
anybody who's listening, if you are feeling overwhelmed and like you go to from 0 to 100 very often, just everything that you just said, Tatiana, I think it's a very good place to start at.
And it's
Yeah,
so accessible, right? Like
it
it's
is.
not carving out extra time. You're already drinking your coffee or your
Right.
tea.
Yeah.
Do it for 2 minutes just to do that. Or like you said, if you experience something and you find yourself pushing that emotion away, what if you, I'm sure everyone has heard the word be in the moment or sit
Right.
with it, let it go. But like, how do you let it go if you haven't sat with it?
Right.
And as human beings, I think we push away discomfort. We don't like problems, right? We want to solve. So we're so quick to jump into something that's easier, right? But it's okay sometimes to be with awkward moments or things that are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because it takes time, like you said, to be able to even label it. Like, wait a minute, my boss just said that. Like, how do I feel about that? Or, okay, my
What were your
kid's having a
thoughts?
meltdown. My child is whining and screaming. It's making me feel really frustrated and angry. How can I like calm myself to help them calm? I mean, it's not easy, right?
No, it's not. No.
But
And a
that's
lot
where the
comes into play.
practice comes in.
Right, exactly. What are the impacts, I guess, from your perspective, also being a physio and seeing like these, like now you're having these conversations with your clients, right, about their mind and how they're thinking and their mindfulness. What is the impact of ignoring this and just kind of powering through our lives, right? Is that when you start feeling it like deep in your body without even realizing there's a connection?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm seeing a lot of different kinds of people, but a lot of people that resonate with me are women with particularly busy working moms, 40 plus. And it's like the magical age of 37. You start to feel
That's so interesting.
physical. Like, I mean, that's again, like that's not based on
No,
research.
but I've seen very similar age groups. Yeah.
Yeah,
Again,
just
not
like
research
as
based.
a like my caseload, right?
Right.
Like there's something about, between 25 to 35, you can power through and you're going to be okay. Then something happens past 30. And then, like, this year I turned 41, definitely feeling it in my body. When I don't address emotional or stress, I carry it. And this is true for a lot of my clients. It shows up in your shoulders and your neck and your back. And then if you have previous trauma, whether it was, I don't know, like you tweaked your back lifting your child maybe like
Or
whenever, or
physical
car
trauma.
accident.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it shows up when you're stressed.
Yeah.
And if you don't address it and breathe through it or do the right things for it with mindful intention. I'm not talking about like go and like run a marathon or something, right? It's like a trigger. So when you feel stressed, it triggers that physical pain, and then your physical pain makes you irritable, and then your irritability makes you more stressed, and then it becomes this vicious pain cycle.
Got it.
And what I'm seeing a lot of is because we all work at a desk. We're sitting a lot. We're a lot more sedentary than human beings used to be. Because we're not moving, you need to actually mindfully move, like setting that intention to move throughout your workday, not just on the weekend, right? That's really, really important.
What advice do you have for parents who might have younger kids? Because like I said, I'm just starting to see like the light at the end of the tunnel of like now it's time. It's like Cindy, here's your free time. Like I'm starting to see it now. What about if there's a parent who's listening who has a very young child or many young children and they're like, I really don't have time. I don't even know how to, I'm overwhelmed. I don't even know how to balance my day. I'm working, picking up the kids, coming home, cooking, they're going to bed. I'm exhausted and I can't move. Like, where do we begin with the whole movement and the mindfulness, right? Like, what are the first steps?
That's a great question. And again, it's not all or nothing. So for parents who are listening who have younger children and you just literally don't have time to go to the gym, you can move at the office. I mean, there's got to be a moment, even if you're in the washroom and you do XYZ spine. I guess it's hard to demo this because this is a podcast, but if you're listening, if you remember like algebra in high school, XYZ is like the 3D chart, right? Yeah. Like you've got an X axis, Y axis, and the Z is one through the paper.
Yeah.
Think of your spine. It's not 2D. You are not a flat cartoon. Your body craves moving in all these directions. So even if you went to the bathroom at work and you're at the sink and you kind of like twist, bend forward, back, side bend, like that's it. And then
Got it.
bonus if you do it mindfully, right? Like, let me feel, can I feel each vertebrae as I curl forward, right? We have 24 bones in our back. Each bone is a joint on top of the other.
Mm,
There's like more than 50 joints in your back. And if
a
you
lot.
think about a long car ride and you don't get up, your knees like kind of hard to open when you get out of the car, right? So think
Especially
of
now.
that for your back.
Yeah.
Like you're sitting all day stuck at a computer, probably not in the best posture.
Mm,
So for those listening who can't carve out that time, that's okay. If you can get up from your desk, even like, every hour, you just
mhm,
do XYZ spine a few times. I promise you, it doesn't take more than like a minute.
mhm.
Your body will actually be so much happier.
That's so good. And I think refreshing to hear that because I'm sure parents might have been anticipating an answer of like 1 hour a day is good. But hearing, no, but it's, because it feels overwhelming. Because I think, especially in the world we live in with social media, you're looking at everybody and it seems like everybody has everything all worked out, right? And you're like,
Yep.
why is that new mom getting an hour workout and I can't, I haven't showered in 3 days? Like, what's going on? Like, what's the difference, And I
Yeah,
think hearing that it's always about baby steps. And I think that's
totally.
the baby step we needed to hear because it's realistic.
Yes, and
Mm,
it's achievable and
right.
it's sustainable,
Yeah.
right? Like I have so many examples where people are like, no, I need a new routine and but then you do it for a month and then you're burnt out of
That's
that.
it.
And
Yeah.
then you fall even worse backwards, right? It's like
Yeah.
crash diets, like they just
Right.
don't
Same.
work.
Yeah. They're the same. Yeah.
Baby little achievable steps, SMART goals is
Hmm.
really what's gonna, help you in the long run. And then it's like banking, right? Like we can't throw $1,000 a day in the bank and then be like, woohoo, next year.
Yeah.
But if you put $1 a day,
Hmm.
right, your future self is going to be so excited. And there's compound interest. That's the same for our health. What's happening inside your body? Not only are you moving your spine, like let's give the XYZ example,
Hmm.
but you're giving your brain cells a break from the computer.
Right.
You're giving your blood a bit more flow. You're encouraging a bit more respiration, your breath. Like that's
Hmm.
all like little banking and
Yeah.
it'll compound over time.
Right. Oh, I love that so much. One thing that I've noticed makes a difference for me as a mom, as a wife, as a human, as a friend is just that like little time before everybody wakes up. It's not always possible. Like we said at the beginning of this conversation, I had a kid who woke me up in the middle of the night and I haven't fallen back asleep yet.
Oh goodness.
But those things happen. So I missed my morning walk and I couldn't do it because I was just drained. But when I do take that time, even if it's a 20-minute walk of like just before everybody wakes up or just being alone or journaling 20 minutes before everybody wakes up, it could be the journaling or the walk. I just feel calm, like for everybody who's involved with me that day, like I can manage and cope with a lot more. Have you heard that from clients? Like, is there like or like for some people, is it maybe at nighttime? Like, I'm assuming it's important for us to carve a bit of that time out too, if we can.
Absolutely. And again, I have clients who are morning people, right? So
Mhm.
they are up before the kids get up so they can have that quiet coffee. They
Mhm.
can read a little bit, journal, do their workout. Like, I mean,
It makes a
oh,
difference.
it does make a difference.
Mhm.
And then there's the opposite end where people are night hawks and they have a bedtime routine. They love having a tea and journaling and then maybe doing a 5-minute stretch and a meditation before they crawl into bed. Or maybe your time is like lunch.
Lunch at work, yeah.
Guaranteed, if you looked at your day, and this is where I think journaling also really helps to like actually write it out.
Hmm.
There's got to be somewhere where you can replace with some mindful movement. I
Hmm.
mean, like how many of us watch lots of Netflix
Yeah.
or scroll social media?
Yeah,
Like,
right?
but if
Yeah.
you write it down, right, you're like accountable. You're like, oh, like I actually, I was on Facebook for 2 hours.
Right?
Like
Yes,
take
it's true.
10 minutes of that 2 hours, or like whatever. I'm exaggerating,
Yeah,
but
but I know what you mean. Yeah. Mm,
right, like you can take that 10 minutes for yourself for mindful movement.
mm. So it's not an all or none sort of thing, right? With what you're saying. Um,
Absolutely.
so and the social media thing is such an important thing for us to mention because I often tell parents like to have certain boundaries for yourself because I also tell them to have boundaries for their child, but we need it for ourselves too. And we get
Yes.
caught up, right? We get caught up in like quick moment of like scrolling, and then we're like, oh crap, like 30 minutes just passed.
Yeah.
Go with it, and then I wasted my night. Or like you binge watch something on Netflix and you're like, I'm going to bed early today so that tomorrow I'm going to be up early and go work out, and then you end up watching TV all night and you're like, oh no, I'm tired.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So I guess if somebody's listening and they're like, yeah, I get caught up in those moments of screen time or social media, how do I step out of that? Do you have any tips?
I think it's just going back to that awareness, right?
Mm,
Like, what are you gaining from it? You
mm,
know, like I have so many friends that have actually opted, not voted, opted to take Instagram off their phone for like
right.
a detox. They
Yeah.
haven't deactivated their account,
Hmm.
but just because they found themselves like mindlessly scrolling
Right.
and then kind of feeling crappy about
Hmm.
themselves. Because,
Hmm.
like you said, people always post like the happy stuff.
Hmm.
How come this mom's house is so perfect? How come she can work out all the time? Like,
Hmm.
it's just
Yeah,
like
we all do
human
it.
nature to compare, but that's not true,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Like, you can post a pretty picture over there and the room is cluttered over there,
Exactly.
right? Or whatever it is. So I think just being aware of how you're spending your time and then like really asking yourself in a loving way though, like not I'm like don't feel like the guilt and shame because at least you're aware. It's just
Hmm.
like, well, okay, like if I did look at Instagram for an hour last night, maybe tonight like I can just be a bit more mindful to take like a quarter of that time and I'm going to do a little bit of a mindful walk.
Mm.
I'm gonna go for a walk around the block and like notice the trees, notice the smell in the air, notice the breeze on my skin. Like it sounds a little bit funny, but when you pay attention, and I like using the five senses because it's accessible. Everyone, has a nose, eyes, skin, we can taste, smell, hear. When you force your brain to be curious about noticing your surroundings, that is actually very powerful to help rewire your brain and calm your nervous system. And that's like actually proven in research. So
Hmm.
that's pretty cool because everybody can do that.
So we haven't even brought this part in yet. The most important part, well, not the most important, but the one that comes into, like you said, the nervous system, regulating the nervous system, because that's what happens to us, right? As parents, we become dysregulated and we lose it on our kids, or we lose it with somebody else, or we feel off. And
Yeah.
that's what the whole purpose of mindfulness is, right? You're regulating your nervous system.
Yes.
Mm.
And, there's so much about mindfulness in our modern day world because we don't get it anymore. Like
Mm.
we don't get it organically anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like before, like let's think of like hunter-gatherer times,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you ran away from threats, like
Right.
physical threats of
Yeah.
like saber-tooth tiger or
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then once your body's like out of the fight or flight or freeze, your body's like, okay, like I'm safe, I'm in my hut, like
Mm-hmm.
I can, digest, I can
Right.
rest, I don't have to run anymore. But
Yeah.
today's threats are like we talked about social media threats. Like you may not know your brain's being threatened, but when you're scrolling and comparing your life, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
to other moms or other
Mm-hmm.
parents, and you're kind of starting to feel like, oh, how come my house isn't like that? Or
Yeah.
I
You
feel like
spiral
I'm not
down.
fit.
Yeah.
You spiral and you're
Yeah.
getting into fight or flight, maybe not as crazy as that
Mm.
saber-tooth tiger,
But you
but you're
are.
you're
Yeah.
elevating your cortisol.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a little bit enough that you don't quite know it. Do
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then think of that over time. Your baseline of cortisol now is a bit higher, right? So you're like kind of in this like constant fight, flight, or freeze,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and your nervous system hasn't had a chance to come down.
Because you haven't run away from a saber-toothed tiger. You're just sitting there
That's
scrolling,
right.
and so your body's not letting go of all that energy.
Absolutely. You got it. So then your body starts carrying it, which is where I like usually people come to me with the physical pain first, right? Then we like unravel and there's like emotional, mental stuff. But that's where that physical piece comes in because you haven't, yeah, you just don't even know, right? Like
Right.
you're like low grade stress
Yeah.
all the time, go, go, go. You're like doing all the things, wearing all the hats. And then suddenly you're like, oh my God, I can't move my back.
Mm.
I'm in so much pain.
It's so interesting. Like now that we say it, I'm just thinking back to why working out might feel so good. Part of that is like you're relieving that stress. I never looked at it that way, but it makes sense. Like you're in that
Yes.
constant like wanting to run away and like getting that energy out, and that like you said, the fight or flight or, freeze. You don't know, your body's just always prepared to run from the bear or the saber-toothed tiger, but there isn't any.
That's
So
right.
it's so
Yeah.
interesting to see that and why it makes such a difference. You touched on one thing about like not being so hard on yourself. And I want to get back to that because I know I know we all do it. And I know, we spoke about like that sort of like your feelings, like to be aware of your feelings, but we also need to be aware of our thoughts, right? So
Yes.
there's Dr. Susan David has a book called Emotional Agility, and she speaks about a space, and that space it's basically CBT, cognitive behavioral training, but your thoughts and your emotions are linked to your behavior, right? So if in that awareness we're starting to realize like our thoughts are negative and we're
Mm.
hard on ourselves because we happen to miss that walk in the morning, or something happened and we couldn't do what we wanted to do tonight, or we ended up watching, Netflix all night, and now we feel bad. How do we get out of that, of like that funk of like, I did it again? Because it's very easy to do it again the next day because you're like, well, I already did it, or like, I'm not feeling good about my body, might as well just not just eat this
Yeah.
bag of chips tonight, like that kind of thought. How do we
Hmm.
get out of that? Because it's so easy,
Yeah.
again, that word spiral, we spiral down and then we don't get back on it and start again.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we did touch on it. But again, just to reiterate, it's
Mm,
not all or nothing,
mm,
right? Like if you did it the night before, it doesn't mean the whole week is shot,
right.
right? Like, okay, so you did it the night before. That's okay. Tomorrow is a different night.
Mm.
And it doesn't have to be crazy. You don't punish yourself for the night before, right? Like you don't say, okay, fine, I'm going to do like a 2 hour walk because last night I watched
Yes.
3 hours of Netflix. No, like that's okay.
Yeah.
Go for your walk tonight. You'll feel better. And then the next night, try to do it again,
Mhm.
like baby steps. And then they start feeling really good. It, like that saying, it takes 21 days
No, I
to
don't
build
know
a
that.
healthy habit. No,
Oh,
like,
okay.
it's
Yes. Okay.
everywhere, but
Yeah.
yes, like
Oh,
it
is it?
takes good 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Everybody's like, oh,
no, okay. I didn't want to make it sound
yeah.
discouraging, but I just want to
It
say,
takes
like,
time.
it does take time and it
Mhm,
takes those baby steps and you build it over time.
mhm,
So, even if you have an off week, an off month, off day, like, it doesn't mean you have to punish yourself.
right.
I mean, you could be disappointed in yourself. It's not saying ignore that, but you could be like, oh, like I could have done better, but okay, like I will tomorrow. And then tomorrow doesn't have to look like double yesterday because you didn't do it,
Right.
but start somewhere and know that you always have a choice. I think often we convince ourselves that we don't have the choice,
Mhm.
but we do. And it can be as little as like 2 minutes,
Mhm.
right? Like even if you walked in your backyard for 2 minutes, you still did a little bit for 2 minutes.
I like that.
Yeah.
Can you, so we've spoken, we're gonna have to, come to an end, unfortunately, but I want to elaborate a little bit more about other mindfulness practices. You touched on the breathing as well. And
Yeah.
you mentioned like a sort of pattern that we should be aware of. Can you elaborate a little bit more about like how we can practice breathing? Because I do know even from myself that I did struggle and still do sometimes, especially when I'm anxious, like I struggle with breathing properly and I feel it. I feel it in my body. So maybe that's a good place to start as well. Now we know about
Sure.
the like being mindful, like that mindful walk or drinking your coffee and being mindful. But how about the breathing? How do we begin that part?
Yeah. So yeah, great question. And actually, this is where I start all my clients is breath. And sometimes people are like, what? Like, I know how to breathe.
Yeah, like I'm breathing right now.
Yeah. But there's breathing and then there's mindful breathing.
Mm,
So, first, contrary to what a lot of yoga or maybe mindfulness or health coaches coach, we try to do it all through the nostrils. I've been reading this book called The Oxygen Advantage. It's really good. It talks about how we need to use the nose to breathe because it helps slow the exchange of air. When we do sort of the inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth, you actually like dump out too much volume of carbon dioxide,
mm,
which then throws off the ratio of carbon dioxide to oxygen in your red blood cells, which
mm.
actually makes you feel hungry for more air.
Wow.
So one big tip is when you're feeling, like you're anxious and you're like breath holding, try to exhale slowly through your nose and then inhale slowly through your nose and continue that. That's one really big tip, through the nose.
Wow.
Okay. And if you
Yeah.
can, if you have like, your sinuses are stuffed or whatever, do it through the mouth, of course, but pretend there's a straw
Okay, so
between your
smaller.
lips.
Yeah.
Smaller, rather than like just
Yeah.
kind of dumping all that air all at once. And then the big one for physical feeling is one hand on heart, one hand on belly.
Mm-hmm.
And shutting down your eyes really helps. And just first being able to notice what's happening under your hands. Is there a bit of movement under each hand? So you have one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly. Relax the shoulders, relax the jaw. And then once you find your breath rhythm here, can you encourage your 3-part breath? So what I mean by that is when we inhale, physiologically, when we're relaxed, you should sort of feel a mild rise in the belly, followed by rib cage expansion, right? Your rib cage kind of flares out side to side, not a lot, just a little. And then your chest might puff just a touch. And then as you exhale, the chest softens, the rib cage softens down and in, and then your belly button softens in towards your spine. So again, that breath in, the inhale is a belly, rib cage, chest. And then as you exhale, the chest softens, rib cage softens, and then your belly softens. So we call that a 3-part breath.
I should
That help?
call you every morning. I like what you did about like being aware of where it's happening in our body.
I love starting with the hand on heart and belly, just to bring awareness to even where your starting point is.
Right. Yeah, I like that.
Right? Because if you do it and you're like, oh, my chest isn't moving at all, or what I find the most is actually rib cage. A lot of, because we sit so much for work, and we're not always in like the neutral spine posture, the rib cage becomes quite stiff and there's not a lot of movement in the ribs, and it surprises a lot of people, but then when they start encouraging it, it actually helps with their mid-back mobility and pain. So I just love starting there, because then it gives people a baseline of like, okay, where am I at? And then you can encourage a 3-part breath. And then from there, you can go into things like the box breathing, the 4-count breathing, all those different techniques. But I would say those are like even the next step. Like first you want to get like a baseline of like, how
are you breathing? Right.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to try that in the morning. It was so interesting to see where and it was a mess, by the way.
Well, you didn't sleep, so
yeah, I don't even know where it happened. So now I think parents that are listening have a good set of tools that they can start with. That mindfulness of just noticing certain moments in your day, and just like you said, using your 5 senses. There's the breathing and just understanding where it's happening in your body, like putting your hand on your heart and the other hand on your belly. Is there anything else that we haven't spoken about that you'd like to tell parents, to try before we have to unfortunately let each other go?
Yeah, I think I love the summary. Good job. I feel like that's a great place to start. And even if parents are finding kids, like those are all accessible for their kids, right? Like, above kindergarten age, probably. Right. But even with your toddler, if they're having like hard to calm them down, or they're having a whiny meltdown, like trying to help them put one hand on heart, one hand on belly. Like, can you feel your breath? What do you smell right now? Close your eyes. What do you see? Like, I think all these tools that we need as parents, they're easy to translate, and try helping to coach your kids. I know growing up, we didn't get a lot of that, right? It was sort of like, stop it. It's over. No more whining. You're not talking anymore.
There's no monster under your bed. Let me shut the door to your room so you're in the dark.
So this is all like new to me in the last, 10 years, but imagine having those tools as a kid. Like that's pretty cool, right?
I love that. I have an app called Wondergrade as well, and we do this kind of stuff for kids. And there's an exercise where we ask a child to put like a stuffed animal on their belly, just so they can lie down and breathe and just see their belly going up and just focus on that. That's the mindfulness part. Just watch your little friend go up and come
Oh,
back.
I love that's so good.
Little ways
Amazing.
it's possible. And I'm just saying that because I really do think it's possible for young kids. And I think these are practices that we do need to be mindful of teaching our kids so that once they do start school, they're equipped, right? Like then all the social emotional stuff, like we need to teach them about themselves first. And then
Yeah.
once they're with other kids, they're like, okay, I can regulate myself and I see that you're dysregulated. Like, let me help you or have the empathy to understand your emotions, right? It becomes like a bigger picture. So I
Yeah.
definitely think we can teach that to young kids.
I love that. And I love that, it starts with you, right?
It
Like
does.
working on yourself as the parent. And it doesn't mean you have to be perfect before you teach your kids or
No,
before
no.
you can do the things, right? But like they'll see that you're doing the work too.
Mm,
Like, oh, like mommy just needs a moment. And
right.
then
Yeah.
like mommy is like holding her heart and belly and breathing. Like that you're setting that example. Like
Mhm.
that's I think that's very powerful.
Bring them along on the journey, right? Like if you're learning how to
Yeah.
do that, take that breath every morning, have them sit with you and have, my kids sometimes will have even like a hot water with some lemon in it and we sit together and it's our tea and we sit together and just like relax a bit. It's okay to show them like during these days that everything
Yes.
we're so busy to have those moments of calm and connection and peace and bring that into your home. So why
Yes.
not bring
And
them
then in
along?
terms of like movement, it's
Mhm.
okay to show them like, okay, for example, I was training for a marathon. I injured my hip. I didn't run the marathon, but I did. I ran all winter in Ottawa. And I've been showing them over the last few months that I'm still working on my body to heal my pain and my injury and my movement. And it's baby steps. Like it's not like I'm just dashing out the door and
Right.
running, but I have to take it step by step
Mm.
and listen to my body, listen to, my emotional,
Right.
physical, all the things.
Right.
And it's really neat because they're like, Mommy, you ran 5K? Like, that's
Mhm.
really good. And I'm like, yeah, I'm
Oh, so
getting
sweet.
there.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh,
so it's just modeling that. And it doesn't have to look perfect. It
mm,
doesn't have to be all right. In fact, it's better that it's not because it is a journey, like you
mm-hmm.
said, right? Like
Exactly.
bring them on the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because
I
that's
love
the
that.
reality of life.
It
Life
is. Oh my gosh.
journey.
And that's where self-compassion comes in. We need
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for everything that you shared with us. I'm so excited that we got to chat again, and it was an absolute pleasure seeing you again. I hope we
Thank
chat again
you.
soon.
It was so nice to catch up and see you, Cindy. Thank you for inviting me on. I hope everyone got something from it.
I'm gonna add the links to the show notes so that people can find you. I know you have your LinkedIn, but is there a website or some way that people can reach you if they have a question?
Sure, yeah. So other than seeing clients face to face, I also run an online program specifically for women called the Move with Ease Method. Definitely, I can send you the link for that
Yes,
to add
please.
to the show notes. And yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Happy to connect. I have a free Facebook group actually for anyone who's interested in just starting.
Okay.
I
Good.
post lots of workshops and lives. It's called Redefining Aches and Aging for Women, but I can include that in the
I'm
show
gonna add
notes
that.
as well.
And I
Yeah.
will join that and I will add it to the show
Amazing.
notes as
I
well.
would love to see you there.
I
We could do
really
some
want to.
XYZ together.
Yes, yes. Thank you again. And thank you to everybody listening to the podcast. Please take a moment to rate it and review it either on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. And I will see you next week. Bye, everyone.